Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video where today we're here with something a little bit different. Now recently I've been getting more and more questions from you guys about my graphic settings, my wheel settings, my camera settings here inside iRacing, and rather than trying to answer that in every single video or trying to leave all the numerous amount of settings that iRacing has in it in the description of a video, I thought just once and for all I would make a one-off video kind of talking through everything. So this isn't going to be kind of a normal race video that we do on the channel, but hopefully if you're new to iRacing and obviously you're trying to set it up and configure it, or you just want to learn something new about the sim as well, then this video will be useful to do. Of course, it's going to be split down into 3 separate parts. So first of all, obviously we're going to have the graphic settings. That's a fairly easy one. Second of all, we are going to have the camera settings in car, and then third and finally we are gonna have my wheel settings as well there. Like I've said, it's a bit of a wordy one today, but it has been one that you guys are requesting, so if you're watching this in the future, hello, but yeah, I'm gonna leave this video linked down in the description of all of my other ones as well. And of course, if you're not already, get yourself subscribed as well. I would greatly appreciate it. And maybe we'll do more of these kind of settings videos on various sim racing titles that I own as well. So let's take a look then over, first of all, at our graphic settings then. Now, I'll be honest, iRacing for me, I've got an RTX 3090, so a little bit outdated now, obviously a generation behind, but I've also got a Ryzen 9 5950X and 64GB of RAM. iRacing is not a particularly intensive sim to run, so I can run everything at 4K completely maxed out I've got the frame rate limit set at 84 still. Ultimately, I don't really find that my FPS goes above 84 very often. You can see I've obviously got a few things still on lower graphic settings. For example, obviously pit objects or grandstands, crowds, and just general objects as well. Obviously, if you hover over any of these, it will explain to you, what they are, what they do inside the game as well. Then now, ultimately for me, that's as much about just not having a distraction as anything else. I've also got 20 cars currently rendered in the sim. I keep it there just because it can absolutely hammer your FPS early on in the race. And for example, if I'm doing like the 24 hours of Le Mans or something like that, normally your frame rate takes a beating anyway early on, just simply because server side I can't really keep up very well. So I run 20 cars. If I'm doing a specific event or something like that, then occasionally I'll up it or bring it down. But 20 cars kind of is a decent sweet spot for me. I think most people like the default is like 10 or 12. So yeah, we've got obviously 12 cars on track and then 8 further ones in the pit lane as well there. You can see obviously all my other settings as well. We've got 8 times anastrophic filtering, 4 times MSAA. All fairly nerdy stuff like that. I basically, when I go onto the sim, I just crank it up to maximum detail, and then I also make sure that I add the cockpit mirrors as well, so we run those with the extra 4. Now, I don't run HDR or anything like that, simply just because it messes around with the recording. My capture card will record in HDR, but YouTube doesn't really support it still, and things like that, and ultimately I don't then want to have to re-edit it back the other way. I'm not someone that is desperately needing like all the graphics to look beyond incredible or anything like that. I'm in the lucky position where iRacing, I can run it like that. But yeah, that's obviously how I like to run everything in the sim as well. I also only run one pre-rendered frame as well in the sim. Not that I've ever found it makes too much of a difference. And then the other little bits and pieces. I like having the driver arms as well, just so I don't know, I just feel more connected with it. I don't like the steering wheel to either stay still or kind of watch it move around by itself. I like having my arm, or the in-game version of my arms as well. And obviously that's really, really useful when we do VR. So yeah, if you're running an RTX 3090 and you've got 64GB of RAM and a 16-core 32-thread processor, those are the kind of graphic settings you can run in sim, and it gives me decent FPS. Now, again, a lot of people go, well, why don't you run like 1080p and get like 400 FPS? Ultimately, I do have to kind of strike a sweet spot between kind of the best performance for me, but also obviously decent graphics for you guys, because let's be fair, nobody wants to watch a video that is, 480p or anything like that. And obviously, everything I do across all of my channels is set up to run at 4K 60, and I get 4K 60 out of it, and it looks good. And clearly, some of you guys think that way as well, because you've asked for this video. In terms of the other quick one, though, of course, I still run race laps inside iRacing. I desperately need to try and test out some other software as well. But because I run race laps, I can't have full screen on, and I also disable the border as well. So that basically just obviously allows that program to run over the top. If you enable full screen, then obviously it's going to force iRacing to the front, so race labs would be like stuck behind it in Sim as well. So if you're struggling with that, disable full screen, but also disable border, because otherwise I just don't like seeing window borders around stuff. And again, it's another thing I have to try and edit out when I showcase the videos as well there. So there you go. Those are my graphics settings for iRacing. For those that have asked how my game looks buttery smooth, it is a very, very powerful PC. I also then record on a separate, very powerful PC, so I don't even have to worry about kind of toning it back for streaming or anything like that, or recording videos. So I got one that plays the game in 4K, and ones that records the video in 4K. Let's head over then, second of all, to my camera settings. Now, these, honestly, people beg me on every game I ever play to show my camera settings. I really don't do a lot with them. Now, iRacing, I have tweaked and changed it a little bit more, but you can see there, if we have a look in the bottom right-hand corner, I've got my mirror set to the right side, so obviously you can see how that kind of changes around at the top of your angle as well. But ultimately, I found it doesn't really make much difference. I'm running no yaw, so obviously that, again, just makes the camera angle a little bit wider, I believe, at the rear. And then I also run no pitch either, because, again, I just don't find it makes much difference. The virtual mirror FOV, again, you can see that's obviously another one that obviously you can tweak around, obviously, to make the camera behind you more zoomed in or more zoomed out. I like 120 degrees, it seems fairly standard to me. And then the driving FOV as well, of course. The lower you bring that, the more zoomed in you are, which makes the car look quicker. But it makes the car actually feel slower, but it makes everything move by quicker as well. So that's why you'll often see, for example, obviously top iRacers running it looking like that. And, because obviously if you're trying to compete at the top level of sim racing, then that is potentially quite useful. For me, I'm not competing at the top level of sim racing anymore, so I don't bother with that. Now, the ones that I have changed, though, are the shift horizon, the driver height, at the bottom there. I really find that I feel like in a lot of cars on iRacing, I'm kind of sat like this, kind of pointing down in the car. So if you run that all the way back down to, 0 even. I feel like I'm looking at the sky normally. So you can see, if I run it there, I feel like my head's in the ceiling of the car. I don't like that. I'd rather sit a little bit kind of lower down, or kind of pointed slightly towards the front of the car. Kind of on towards the nose a little bit, because it gives you a bit of a better idea as to the car in front of you. I've then also got my driver height raised by a single inch, again, to sort of try and combat that the other way around. It's just what works for me. This, you've just got to sit and tweak around with all the settings and work out what you like. What I use won't work for you, potentially, and everything else, and yeah, it's what I like in the sim. I like to kind of be sat up a little bit more, also looking over the nose of the car a bit more, because even in real life, I sit very upright when I'm driving. Even if I'm just sat on the motorway, I'm still sat very upright, because it's just the way I'm comfy. Last but not least then, of course, we will head back out, and we will take a look at our wheel settings then, as I'll have the car. If I don't do that, you'll be yelling at me in the background. Now, obviously, I'm running a Fanatec wheel setup. So we run a Fanatec CSL GT DD Pro. Yes, it's a mouthful. So that is the 8Nm boost kit version. And then usually for iRacing, I'm either running this, my Fanatec Formula V 2.5X, or my... it's the Xbox Universal Hub with a custom. It's got a OMP rim that I bought off eBay for like 40 quid. So obviously, because I'm on Fanatec, you obviously get tuning settings both inside the wheel and inside the game. Now, I have got like a full custom wheel setup for iRacing inside my wheel, obviously alongside the game as well. So we'll kind of run through both of those side of things as well then. So as you can see, we run 1060. Well, actually, what I need to do is get up Fanalab as well, so you can kind of compare and contrast. Because obviously, they should theoretically be the same, but they do run slightly differently as well to each other. I can't really kind of zoom. Can I make that smaller? We're going to try and make that software a bit smaller. Well, I can't do it. No, I can't fix that. I'm sorry. It's just going to be the way it is. So, yeah, we run 1,060 degrees inside the sim. It just works. Obviously, you recalibrate your wheel. I love iRacing's calibration system for any steering wheel. The fact it just works always is fantastic. In fact, I use iRacing to test new hardware as well that I'm using. In Sim, it's set to 1,060 degrees. In the Fanlab settings, which I'll run through in a second, it's set to 1080. Also, I've got a load cell brake, but weirdly, I found it easier not to have that bound inside iRacing because it kind of feels like the two bits of software kind of overlap each other. So I don't actually run the load cell brake option inside the game as well. I've got the force factor set to 1.8. Again, I prefer with my brake force to do everything through Fanatec rather than inside the sim as well, just because I kind of like to get a one fit fixes all on most games. So pretty much every game I ever play, I've got the same kind of wheel settings as well there. Now, force feedback, I've got force feedback obviously enabled, linear mode and reduced force when parked. I run 19.1 strength. I was running that higher, but a lot of you yelled at me for how much it was clipping. Obviously, I've got the wheel force set to 8 Newton meters, the maximum that this Fanatec base will work. 50% intensity, 0% smoothing, 0% damping, and 0.0% minimum force. Ultimately, I always find with those settings in any game, you kind of lose some of the precision if obviously you run some of those settings higher up. I like having quite a raw driving experience from it. You know, kind of, I feel like the Fanatec DD wheels do a pretty good job of kind of giving you all the information you'd want. So I, don't really kind of ever enable anything in any game unless, like, curbs are clipping horrendously or anything like that. But iRacing is a well-built sim, so that isn't usually a problem unless it should be a problem. Sequential shifting, of course, like that, or I've obviously got my Fanatec proper shifter as well. This video isn't sponsored by Fanatec, despite how much I feel like I'm saying it. And then I've also got auto engine start, auto wipers, and auto tear off as well. Just because I don't want to have to constantly go through my black box to change all of those things as well. Now, I've got a few other, obviously, control maps. Annoyingly, I went onto iRacing today to film this, and I've lost quite a few of my settings. So, the big ones you need are, first of all, obviously, your gears. Second of all, I would say is going to be your black box. So, that is just set to the toggle switch on my steering wheel as well. Pretty much everything else, it would appear, is the iRacing default again. So I need to go through and kind of fix some of those and obviously get, like, you know, my pit lane limiter and things like that on my brake bias reset up as well. Of course, iRacing, it gives you a world of options. And yeah, with the Fanatec software as well, you can kind of pick and choose as you like. I'm tempted as well at some point to try and set up my Stream Deck to do, like, a load of stuff with all the sims as well. Maybe make, like, a huge video on that at some point in the future as well there. Taking a look, though, over on the Fanalab side of things. If you've got a Fanatec wheel and you aren't using Fanalab, just download it. It works really well. As you can see, I've got the max torque per output set to 6 currently. Again, it's just been a little bit funny recently, so I'm just running it slightly lower than I normally would. 1080 degrees again on the steering wheel. So yeah, slightly different to in sim, but it doesn't make much difference. 75% force feedback strength. Peak on the scale. The natural damper I've got set to 70, as well as the friction and inertia. I found with those, I wanted it more than halfway, otherwise it just felt a little bit bland. But yeah, you don't want to kind of run it too high up either. I've got 0 on the FFB interpolation filter, 100% on the force effect intensity, and then 100% as well on the game force effect strength, the game spring effect strength, and the game damper effect strength there, with the brake level indicator disabled. And then the big one I always find for me as well is the brake force as well. I've got that set to 30%. I pretty much run 30% in every game I ever play because I run the hardest springs that Fanatec provide you with the pedals. So they're obviously a bit more durable, and it means I don't have to put as much force through them so that I don't absolutely wreck my pedal set as well there. But there we go. Those are all of my settings inside iRacing. I hope for you guys this video has been useful. Like I've said, it is a bit of a wordy one. It is kind of one that is probably not going to be very useful until you're kind of in that scenario, or you're just one of those people that's really interested in that kind of thing as well. If you'd like to see more videos like this from me, maybe on other sims as well in the near future, please do make sure to leave a like, get yourself subscribed. Tomorrow I've hopefully got a fun video coming on Automobilista 2, where we're going to take on some VR racing as well there. But thank you all so much, and we'll be back very soon with more sim racing content.